Hello Internet, Seth Skórkowski, and today we'll be discussing the Hollow Earth Expedition by Exile Games Studio.
Hold on. Didn't we just review Hollow Earth Expedition a couple months back? Am I going crazy here?
Well, we reviewed the game system Hollow Earth Expedition a couple months back. This review is over the sample adventure that's in the core book that's titled The Hollow Earth Expedition. You can tell the difference because this one has a "the" at the beginning of it.
Wow, we are only a few seconds into this review, and I'm already going to award this scenario the prize of least imaginative title ever.
Lackluster title aside, the scenario is short, coming in at just 12 pages, and it can be played in just simply 4 hours. It's an introductory scenario that's designed to ease both new players and new game masters into the world and the game system of Hollow Earth Expedition. It does a decent job. Not bad, but also not great. There is a lot of great opportunity to expand the scenario and make it a whole lot better, and that's what we're going to discuss. I'll be offering my criticisms and my tips and my suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this scenario.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to give this one to you from a player's side of things, as well as my usual peanut gallery sort of comments.
Now, before we go any further with this review, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So for any players in the audience, if you ever want to experience this adventure, you should stop here. Otherwise, you're going to ruin the surprise. But send your game master this way to get some ideas on how to run this scenario for you. Okay, Game Masters, let's dive in. As I said, the scenario is designed for both new Game Masters and new players that are either new to role-playing or just new to the Hollow Earth Expedition system. The scenario offers different motivations and reasons for players to use 8 of the pre-generated sample characters that appear in the core rulebook, which gives you a good selection if you just want to grab and go with them. The scenario opens with the PCs are called to a Manhattan office by Major Eaton of the U.S. Army Intelligence. He's described as being rotund, balding, with a mustache, wearing a blue suit and smoking a pipe. If that sounds familiar to you, it should, because it's this guy. And if you don't know who this man is, please drop everything and watch Raiders of the Lost Ark right now. And I love the nod that this adventure is given to that film. Eaton explains to the PCs that they have intercepted a Nazi communique that leads the army to believe that the Nazis are sending an expedition to the North Pole to reach a place called Ultima Thule, a mythical place believed to contain a powerful artifact of ancient alien technology. One thing about the intercepted message that Eaton reads to the player characters is that it mentions the Frankel journals. Now, this is a reference to the short story that appears at the beginning of the core rulebook, The Flight of the Eagle, and that is a very neat reference to it, but your players are probably not going to get it, and the player characters are definitely not going to get it, so I really don't like its inclusion in the message. Instead, I suggest that you make it the Amundsen journals, referencing the real-world explorer Roald Amundsen, who was involved in one polar expedition in 1926, but then later vanished in 1928. Players can either roll to see if they knew who he was, or game masters might actually want to write into the character's backstories that they knew him, and that is actually why they were selected for this particular job. Once the PCs have accepted the job and have provisioned up, they are taken to the Aurora, a massive, one-of-a-kind airship.
Holy crap, guys, this is going to be freaking awesome. And when we find those Nazis, I'm calling dibs on that thing's big 50 caliber machine gun.
After leaving New York, they do stop briefly in Norway, and once they arrive, the captain informs them that they're actually landed in the exact same spot that the airship Norge used in 1926 during its polar expedition with Amundsen and Umberto Nobile. He then goes on to say how Nobile tried again in 1928, but his airship crashed, and how Amundsen took a plane to go help and rescue him, but then was never seen again.
Well, thanks for the random trivia there, Captain. Why the hell does this guy even think I care?
Well, I love the fact that the module is blending very real history and into the story narrative. The random mentioning of it here feels very forced and very awkward. It's for this reason that I suggest that you change the intercepted message at the beginning of the scenario to be about the Amundsen journals, and possibly having a player character who knew this missing explorer, and that way it feels more natural to the plot and something that actually involves the player characters versus something they're just kind of hearing about. While they're in Norway, the PCs are going to discover that the Thule expedition left a week ahead of them in a German U-boat, and the PCs are going to need to hurry along if they want to catch them in time.
First, if your player characters miss that streetwise roll, and it's an easy roll, they shouldn't be able to do that easy, but trust me, I am a pro at missing easy rolls. So if your player characters do miss that streetwise roll, have one of the NPC crew members find out that information. That way they can pass that to the player characters and pass along that sense of urgency that the module is trying to convey. Second, this is a pulp game, and so far, nothing much has really happened. Your players, they haven't done squat, so I suggest that you maybe liven it up a little bit. Maybe add a saboteur.
Because your players are probably going to be chomping at the bit by this point to get some action, have the PCs encounter, 2 to 3 Nazi agents that are living in this town, or have one of them, maybe see a figure running out of the docked airship, and now the PCs have to scramble in order to get a bomb out of the airship in time, and that kind of leads to a nice sort of exciting moment that can liven the game up. Now, once they do leave Norway and head for the North Pole, the airship begins encountering all sorts of strange phenomenon. Headwinds, magnetic disturbances, the radio goes completely out, and then they experience a sunset, which definitely should not happen at the North Pole at this time of year.
While interesting, again, the players really aren't doing anything here but sitting around and listening to the game master tell them all this information. Fun story, unexciting game. So once again, let's liven this thing up.
When the airship hits the headwind, make it brutal. Have some dex checks, make sure they don't get knocked around the ship for a bit. Mention boxes of supplies that are in the back, tumbling down and crashing, maybe certain things breaking. If you have a character in the group that's a mechanic, maybe one of the engines on the airship goes out. Now that character has to, go out and try to repair that engine. Or you could have that same mechanic or a different sort of character trying to fix this broken radio. Even the non-mechanic player characters can get involved in all of this. Maybe they're trying to lift a heavy box or boxes off of a trapped NPC, or maybe they're trying to do first aid and trying to patch up some NPCs or PCs that might have gotten banged around. And this makes this portion of the adventure much more involved for your player characters than how it currently is. Now eventually the winds cease, the sun rises, and the PCs find themselves in a strange and tropical land, complete with dinosaurs.
So if you as the game master have been following along with the module and not adding any of the pulpy excitement that I've been recommending to you so far, you are now in the 5th scene that nothing has really happened. And now is your time to fix that. Picture this. Pterodactyls attack the Aurora. Maybe the sounds of the airship's engine, right? They've whipped these things up into a frenzy and now they're attacking this huge abomination that's in their territory. Maybe they're slamming themselves up against the engines, right? Maybe one of them gets tangled up in the propeller, breaks the propeller, and now that engine is smoking and the captain's all like, oh my God, they're gonna take down our ship. So all the PCs, right, they're lined up in the gondola's windows. They got their rifles out and they're shooting these prehistoric monsters off of their airship. Maybe one of them gets a hold of that big 50 caliber machine gun and he's all like, this is pulp gold.
Eventually the PCs will see a clearing with triceratops in it, and on the far side they're going to find a glint of metal that catches their eye. Now the module assumes that the player characters are going to land the airship here in order to investigate it, but I say never assume anything that the player characters are going to do. What if none of them makes their difficulty 3 observation check, and now they don't even see the airplane, or they decide that they don't want to do it because they were kind of running short on time, or maybe they just don't want to stop for whatever reason. So instead, I suggest that you have the captain tell the player characters that they need to stop and land the airship, and that's why they were looking for a clearing that was large enough for the Aurora to land in. Maybe the ship was damaged in the headwind, or maybe it was damaged in that pterodactyl attack if you decide to go that route. Or maybe they're just running low on fuel and the captain is worried that they might be too low to explore this strange new land and then have enough fuel to get them back home afterwards. Once they do land and they go check out the plane, which should be a lot more obvious to see once they're on the ground, the PCs are going to fight a protective mother triceratops, and then they're going to counter a scavenging T-Rex, and this can lead to some good action. But at this point, this is the first action in the entire adventure. Now, investigating the crashed plane also leads to some good information.
Hey guys, get this. This flight log says that it was being flown by a Roald Amundsen back in 1928 when this plane went down. Wasn't that the name of that guy the captain was talking about when he started spouting all that useless trivia back in Norway? I mean, I really wasn't listening to him. He was boring me to tears.
This is why I strongly encourage that game masters introduce the story of Amundsen at the very beginning of the scenario during the initial briefing that they receive, or have one of the player characters have actually known him at some point in their past. This makes the discovery that he might possibly be alive much more personal to the player characters.
Holy crap, guys. This is Roald's airplane, and there is no body aboard that wreckage. You know what? I also saw a trail back there leading off into the jungle. That means Roald, he might still be alive. Hang on, buddy. We're coming to save you.
The module assumes that the PCs are just going to follow this trail and leave the airship behind. So this is also why I recommend that you have the airship land in order to make necessary repairs or because they need to conserve their dwindling fuel supply. Now, after a few hours of hiking, the PCs are going to encounter a bunch of friendly natives who are then going to take them back to their tree village, kind of like an Ewok village. Now, there is a nice reference to the Flight of the Eagle short story once again in this scenario, so I do like that, but probably nobody but the game master is ever going to get that.
And not just that, Roald Amundsen is living amongst these tribesmen, which this could be met with either a wonderful reunion as the excited player characters are reunited with their old friend, or if you decided not to have him know him, it could be met with kind of a bored shrug because he's just some guy that they only heard about 2 days ago during the captain's trivia night.
While they're having dinner with the tribe's chief, the chief is going to offer to trade something to the PCs in return for one of the player characters' firearms. Amundsen's going to advise the PCs against giving the chief a gun, and if they decide not to give the chief a gun, the chief is going to get mad at Amundsen for blocking him, and he's going to go ahead and tell the PCs about this lost city as a way to get back at Amundsen for preventing him from getting this firearm.
Yeah, but what if your player characters are all like, yeah, sure, here you go, have a gun. It ain't got no bullets anyway, and it ain't gonna hurt anybody. If the player characters give the chief a gun, does that now mean that they don't learn about the lost city and now the adventure just kind of ends?
Exactly. The module assumes exactly how this conversation is going to go. Now, maybe the PCs will trade with the chief, or maybe not, but the game master needs to have a few plans in place just depending on what your characters are actually going to do. Now, the easiest way is just to have Amundsen simply tell the PCs about the lost city once they've explained to them that the Nazis are here and that the Nazis are trying to find it, and that feels a lot more natural and it gives a reason why he's going to lead them there instead of this, oh, well, now that the chief told you all about it, I might as well, take you to the lost city, which is currently what it is, which is following a very narrow thread of what the PCs are going to do. Now, once they do go there, the lost Atlantean city is extremely cool. When the PCs arrive, they'll be able to make out movement around a tower. Off the shore, they can make out the Nazi submarine.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
The Nazis are carrying a giant crystal out of the tower building, all under the eye of the evil super Nazi that's in charge. However the PCs decide to attack is completely up to them. Now, either before the attack or during the attack, Roald's going to send his 8-men friends in from around on the other sides in order to help them out, steer the Nazis, or maybe just box them in where the PCs can pick them off. However, game masters do not overuse the 8-men or accidentally have them do all the work for the PCs, and now the PCs are mostly just sitting around and watching. I suggest you use them as more of threats in order to box the Nazis in. Maybe have them snatch up a few of the Nazis that are around the outer edges, kind of chase the rest of them into one spot, but do that more than just having them make an outright attack and doing all the work for the player characters. Now, at some point during this entire combat, this crystal is going to be broken. Now, the module suggests that Roald orders the 8-men to do it, but I say that you leave that option as a last resort. There's a good chance that it might get hit by a stray bullet, or it might get dropped by the men that are carrying it, or maybe you could have the villainous super Nazi, kind of throw back his head and, be all like, well, if I can't have it, no one can, and, he could shoot it with his Luger, and that's what causes this thing to start sparking and everything to go crazy. Now, once the crystal is broken, the PCs have to flee before a massive explosion, and at that point, the adventure is done. Now, the PCs could then go on and explore or find this Nazi submarine if they want. There might be people still on it. I imagine there was a small crew left there. Now, personally, I like the idea that the player characters need to find the Nazi submarine in order to get fuel off of it to give to their airship, because their airship might be running too low on fuel. Or you could have it if the airship was damaged, maybe in the pterodactyl attack or in that huge headwind that they were hitting. Now the player characters need to commandeer this Nazi submarine and kind of use the crew in order to get them out of the hollow earth. Now I leave this all completely up to you of whatever it is you want to do with that. But the last thing that the module has written into it is when the player characters return to the field where the Aurora was landed, the airship is now gone without a trace, and now the heroes might just be trapped inside the hollow earth. Personally, I think that is a great pulpy ending and a nice little cliffhanger if you're going to use this adventure as the setup to the start of a campaign, launching your heroes off on a series of further adventures from here. However, if this is going to be a one-shot adventure, having the player characters end by being trapped here at the end because the airship just inexplicably left them for no good reason, and there's nothing that the PCs did or could have done to have caused or stopped this, that is a bit of a downer, and you probably don't want that because that's not going to end the game with a good taste in your players' mouths. Now overall, the Hollow Earth Expedition is an okay adventure. It is good for novice game masters that are unused to the system, and it's simple enough for novice players. We have a wide array of all the pulpy things that can paint a good picture of what this system and this game is about. The adventure also gets props for being included inside the core rulebook. I'm of the opinion that every RPG core book should always come with a sample adventure, so good props to Exile Game Studio for including it in there. However, I find the adventure just a bit too railroady, where the PCs are just going from one scene to another with no control, and many of these scenes, they're not actively doing anything, they're really just observers to the events going on. Players, understandably, want to be involved in the game. They want to be rolling dice, they want to be taking names, and that is the biggest issue with this adventure. That's my biggest reason for saying that you bulk out the scene in Norway with maybe having some Nazis that they fight, or having a saboteur that they chase off of the airship and now they have to find a bomb, or you liven up the windy and the storms as they're entering the hollow earth, or you just have them fight against some pterodactyls once they arrive. That'll liven the game up, and that gets the players involved, and that's where the good memories come from versus them sitting around and listening to you pretty much tell them a story. Now that should be enough to get this game exciting and your players engaged into it. So while I do have several criticisms about the adventure does have enough potential to become very memorable and very fun with only a few small changes that you need to make ahead of time. And because the adventure is free in the rulebook, I do strongly suggest that you check it out.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you want to see some more of our stuff, either game reviews or RPG philosophy or any of that, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, heroes, you have a great day. You know, if you allowed the player characters to return at the end to Major Porkins and give him that crystal or whatever, he could be all, "We have top men working on it right now." Top men. Yeah, it kind of feels like they dropped the ball by not allowing that ending.